One, and we are recording with the most interesting doctor in the world, Dr. Robert Malone, who I was just confessing my pains at not being able to grow a full face of beard, which I inherited from my grandfather, as he's sitting here with a magnificent mane and not here quite yet, but he should be popping in any moment. I guess he's too famous for us now, being on Joe Rogan, as Dr. Peter McCullough, but Dr. Malone just broke 500,000 followers on Twitter. So, I mean, that's something. But as everyone knows, you've been here before. You are the inventor of the mRNA vaccine, despite what the media would like to slander you as anything but that. And you were obviously doing podcast day in and day out and doing the Lord's work. But there is a lot to talk about. And I did want to ask you, have you seen the White House, the press release from last night or this morning about the Omicron variant?
Oh, no, please tell me. Oh. I can't keep up with Jen Psaki.
Oh, dude.
I'm not sure I want to. This is the dark winter one.
Yeah. We are intent on not letting Omicron disrupt work and school for the vaccinated. You've done the right thing. We'll get through this. All right. For the unvaccinated, you're looking at a winter of severe illness and death for yourselves, your families, and the hospitals you may soon overwhelm.
Right. Thank you for that, Joe.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
This was brought to my attention. I actually have two Newsmax interviews. One's in the can and one happens at 9 tonight. And so this was brought up in the earlier one. And my comment was, I can't help remembering Ronald Reagan's Morning in America campaign. What a contrast, right?
That shining beacon on a hill.
We need hope. We don't need this constant barrage of fear porn. And oh, by the way, on Omicron, the data keep rolling in, showing little or no death. I just posted a fantastic little graph tracking South African cases and death over the last few months. And you go through the prior waves with Delta, et cetera, and the case count goes up, the death goes up. And then Omicron spikes and the death stays flat at close to zero. Then we've got multiple papers we could talk about. I presented a bunch of them in Nashville on Sunday that are all good news. Let me share this one just to tease your audience. Tommy, what are the predominant symptoms of, so I'll make this a guess what I'm thinking question. What are the predominant symptoms of Omicron according to the British Medical Journal peer-reviewed publication from the College of London?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're identical to the common cold.
Pretty darn close. Runny nose, headache, fatigue, sneezing, and sore throat. Oh, that sounds pretty wicked. Now, the esteemed Dr. McCullough has joined us, fresh off of lighting the world on fire after speaking with Mr. Rogan.
Dr. Peter McCullough, who, for everyone who hasn't listened to our earlier episodes, we now have the two titans. Dr. Malone, inventor of the mRNA vaccine, 500,000 followers on Twitter. Dr. Peter McCullough, the most published cardiologist in world history, fresh off of the Joe Rogan experience. And then me, of course, Dr. Tommy, with my 900 followers on Rumble, after I've been permanently banned from YouTube for hosting both of you. I hadn't even thought about that. My two suspension givers and banners. I've got my angels, and or I guess you're both demons on my shoulders helping me get banned. Dr. McCullough, as not to be rude, how are you doing? Can't hear you. Uh-oh, we can't hear him.
No, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just came back from the hospital. I just got back home.
Don't worry
and it's a pleasure to join, and distinct honor to join Dr. Malone and yourself, Tommy. I'm so sorry. I think I was the original one that got you demonetized. And you're doing such a wonderful. You're viewed as one of the up and coming podcast journalists in the world. And sure enough, we had a discussion on COVID-19. It was all over with.
The best part is how I was never monetized, so it's kind of a big brain trick. You can't get demonetized if you've never been monetized. But I got suspensions for Malone and McCullough, and the final nail in the coffin was Dr. McCullough. It was a 30-second clip I actually excised from one of the episodes because I thought it was so important. And it was so vanilla. And Dr. McCullough, I mean, you couldn't have scripted this. He began it by saying, vitamins do not cure COVID-19, but for you and your loved ones, vaccinated or not, you should take turmeric, vitamin D, zinc, and quercetin. You get them at Walmart at $7 a month. I took that out specifically and made it its own standalone thing just so I could upload it faster. And I was sending it to my friends. I was sending it to my both liberal and conservative friends, vaccinated, unvaccinated. I was like, hey guys, here's some kind of middle of the road. This could help everyone. A lot of my listeners are older guys. And I was like, hey, just for everyone. And that YouTube decided that that was the final sin and that I would be crucified for that. But yeah, Dr. Malone.
And by the way, Tommy, that's now listed on the official state of Florida website, I think pretty much verbatim, as their recommendation for preparation and pre-treatment for COVID-19 prevention.
So, all right, well, maybe I just need to move to Florida because that was it. And the best part was, the best part was the title of the video was "Take Your Vitamins" from Dr. Peter McCullough. And that's the video that got me banned.
You know, Tommy, I'm not an expert on vitamins, and I have great respect for our naturopathic doctors and integrative medicine doctors who have made contributions. But, you know, I just finished with probably about a third of my clinic today were people who had COVID-19 recently. And I am so impressed with the weight loss and how in the elderly, it's such a severe syndrome. I saw a patient today who had lost a clear amount of muscle mass. Now, she received first class early home treatment. She was not hospitalized. She did get ill. And boy, she has brain fog. She has tremulousness. She actually has a tremor. At the same time, she has almost a new disorder between what's called the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And we see this after the illness, that there's a whole variety of post-COVID manifestations. And my understanding of this, I'm sure Dr. Malone can add a lot of color, is that this must be in some way related to the residual effect of the spike protein in the human body after the respiratory illness.
Dr. Malone?
I think that's a very reasonable hypothesis. We've also got the other confounding factors of immunosuppression, latent DNA virus reactivation, and God only knows whatever creepy crawlies we've got associated with this. Hopefully not the effects of Hydra injection or graphene oxide. That was tongue in cheek, sarcasm for those that are sarcasm impaired. So Peter, by the way, I have joined you in the Hall of Infamy. Today, on December 20th, I received from my state board, licensing board in the state of Maryland, complaint against me, and I have 5 days to respond. My response is due on Christmas Day, and the complaint was filed by an internist in the state of Hawaii. So I just wanted to let you know that now we can be friends because we're part of. I finally joined your club, so I feel somehow validated.
But you know,
I just felt the need to share that.
You know, there seems to be no end. On the way home, I got a text from a doctor in Texas who was reaching out from his assistants, and she said that she had a complaint lodged against her that she did not encourage the vaccine in an 83-year-old patient. And, you know, her commentary was that the patient already had autoimmune illness, had some other concerning features to the case. And but you know, here we have vaccines that are still in the clinical development process that are emergency use authorized, and now there are complaints when doctors don't encourage the vaccines.
Now,
That's
Dr. Malone.
Tommy, you're driving.
So yeah. So from that, so Dr. Malone and I were just talking about Dr. McCullough. I don't know if you have seen the press release from 18 hours ago, so roughly midnight, from the White House. So for all future listeners, today is, as Dr. Malone said, Monday, December 20th, 2021. So I think this was from late last night, December 19th. We are intent on not letting Omicron disrupt work and school for the unvaccinated. You've done the right thing. Or for the vaccinated, you've done the right thing, and we'll get through this. Sounds good. For the unvaccinated, you are looking at a winter of severe illness and death for yourselves, your families, and the hospitals you may soon overwhelm. And as Dr. Malone said, that's quite a contrast to a feeling of hope, especially around Christmas. So with that, with you both now getting your complaints in the halls of infamy, with YouTube censoring the Joe Rogan clips from the episode with you, Dr. McCullough, from LinkedIn unpersoning you, we have all of these things kind of moving together, and more people are starting to wake up every day, from John Campbell on YouTube to Dr. Pranash. Just seeing what exactly is going on, the fear mongering, the CEO of Pfizer saying Omicron cannot be taken down by one booster, but surprise, if you take 2 boosters, which by the way I sell, you can fight Omicron. So Dr. McCullough, what are your thoughts on this? And I know we're beating a dead horse, but what are your thoughts on these just endless waves of fear and despair? I mean, what can you, an actual physician, as well as Dr. Malone, what can you say to tell people to don't live in the shadow of this? This isn't a demon. This is just another variant that they're using to shove down your throats. What could you say to people who are genuinely terrified?
As a practicing doctor, I recognize that there's, the medical condition of a patient, but there's also the psychological aspect of the patient. And here, applying to populations, it is not a healthy thing to do as a leader to speak to a population and use the words, dark and death. 5 days before Christmas, we have a situation. I was actually asked to provide some commentary that on a national news, I believe on Friday. And I said, I have a joyous message at Christmas. We've made great advances in treatment. I am so impressed with how our use of now the nasal virucidal washes with dilute povidone iodine and hydrogen peroxide are really working in mass numbers now. Bangladesh is doing a terrific job with this approach. The monoclonal antibodies are absolutely fantastic. The recent addition from GlaxoSmithKline, it got the EUA in May. Socherivimab, 85% reductions in hospitalization and death. We still have Regeneron, our workhorse. Lilly is back on the market with bamlanivimab and ertesivimab. Our other drugs are used in combination. I'm getting more and more experience in treating patients without ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. So Dr. Chetty in South Africa, Dr. Brentios in South America, great pioneers in new ways to treat the illness. I'm becoming more convinced that famotidine clinically plays a role. I know Dr. Malone is leading a pivotal clinical trial, but we have available over-the-counter basically combinations of nutraceuticals and add in famotidine oral nasal virucidal therapy. This gives great hope, honestly, to Canada, the UK, Australia, South America, and that we don't have to have the world revolve around a single drug, ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. We do have additions coming from Pfizer. It's a combination of 2 protease inhibitors, kinase-like 3 protease inhibitors. The clinical trials large, but the rates of hospitalization and death were below 1%. So again, they recruited low-risk patients, but nevertheless, there were substantial relative risk reductions. Then the Merck drug, molnupiravir, a more modest relative risk reduction. So with so many tools in the toolbox, I want Americans and people worldwide to know that our seniors and others may contract COVID-19, but as long as we're prompt on early treatment, it should not be a surprise. We're 2 years into this. There shouldn't be any more surprise phone calls. If I got COVID-19, what should I do? We're telling everybody to know where their monoclonal antibody center is, know the hours of operation, have pre-checked this out with the doctor, making sure the doctor is ready to treat the patient when they develop COVID-19.
Dr. Malone.
And by the way, Peter, I saw the data on the Pfizer drug combination was presented to the active committee this last week. It was their last meeting of the year. And I concur, it looks really encouraging both in the low and the high risk cohorts in the initial data sets that we saw. I don't want to, if there's a pharmaceutical company that I have an intrinsic bias against, it would be Pfizer for some reason. But I think that we need to give credit where credit's due, and celebrate the fact that combination is looking so encouraging. So I am totally with you, Peter. And then we have Omicron. And although the geniuses at Imperial College in the UK, based on modeling, are now raising scare tactics that they think that Omicron is going to fill the hospitals in the UK based on their modeling projections. Remember, these are the guys that were claiming that we were going to have 2 million dead right away in the United States, and really have overshot the mark with their modeling again and again and again. But of course, that doesn't stop multiple press pieces on this, again, amplifying the fear. But all the data repeatedly, and I was just mentioning to Tommy earlier, the latest data coming out of South Africa, clear spike in Omicron and flat line near baseline on death, whereas all the prior waves have seen following death spikes that are very substantial. Then we have the Danish data. I mean, it's looking, what I said, and I'm sorry, Peter, you weren't able to join us in Nashville. So that's a plug. I hope you get to be with our next rally. But in any case, I went over the latest Omicron papers, and to every single one is looking really positive. And as a vaccinologist, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if I was to wish to design an infectious, live attenuated mucosal vaccine for this disease, this would be pretty darn close to my ideal. Omicron.
The Omicron variant, you would say, is an ideal vaccine.
It certainly has a lot of the key characteristics. And remember, in historically, with coronavirus vaccines, it's been extremely problematic, veterinary and human, to avoid the let's say vaccine-enhanced infection and disease problem. And the veterinary vaccines that have succeeded are mucosal vaccines. They're intranasal. And in Omicron, the data, I'm sure Peter is all over this, the data from Hong Kong, because he has more, his ability to absorb the literature is about an order of magnitude better than mine. But the Hong Kong release data suggesting that the pattern of infection is more bronchial and less deep lung. And then there's another set of data that has been released from a laboratory in the UK suggesting that, based on their laboratory assays using pseudovirus, that the spike protein of Omicron is much less able to induce cell fusion than prior variants. The only thing negative about all this is that Omicron is able to slip through both vaccines and, to some extent, natural immunity. But, that's kind of a good news, bad news story, because it means that those people are probably going to generate secretory IgA, which is what we really need, I think, to get us out of the woods here, unless people are going to go around, injecting virus together with their IV drugs. So I think, thanks for the laugh, Tony. Tony, I think this looks like Morning in America to me too. Matter of fact, in my Nashville slide deck, I used a sunrise image as the transition from my grim message about mandating pediatric jabs to my good news message about what the data are right now with Omicron.
Well, that's beautiful. And it's, you have to find that sort of, and not silver lining in the sense that it's like like weird analogy, if like your leg gets ripped off by a shark, you kind of go into shock. So your brain shuts down. You don't want to just find positivity for the sake of finding positivity, because, if the building's on fire, you can't be going, hey, you know what? It's a beautiful carpet. Yeah. Like, sometimes you have to get out. But what you guys are saying is there actually is genuine optimism or reasons to be optimistic. Dr. McCullough, thoughts on anything and everything that Dr. Malone just said?
Well, Dr. Malone has published a wonderful, I believe it's a Substack, but it's a wonderful multi-paragraph summary outlining those findings, which I think are key. I was impressed with the thing that came over the wire today from Denmark, and it looked like there was an inversion in the proportionality, meaning that looked like Omicron almost was disproportionate among those who are vaccinated. It may just be the early evolution of what we're seeing here. But having said that, if it's a mild illness and it gets the vaccinated, additional immunity over time, I think the freedom of pulmonary complications is welcome. I have to tell you, I think Delta was very hard. I thought it was a very, very hard, it was very heavily contagious, seemed to really impact young people. Longer illnesses, it's been my observation, Delta, longer illnesses than Alpha. We had a predominance of Alpha. When I had COVID-19, I was in research, so I had the benefit of being, sequenced. I had the Alpha variant, so did my wife, and it was relatively short duration. There was some residual, but we were okay. These Delta infections, I saw a patient today, I believe he had Delta, I think, through all of November. We're now, deep into December. He works for our city transit, and his pulmonary exam today was abnormal. He's coughing. I guarantee when we do chest x-rays and CTs on these patients, they have remarkable findings radiographically for a long time afterwards. Now, sadly, he got no early treatment. I asked him about it. He said, no, my doctor said there wasn't any treatment. I stayed at home. I kind of gutted it out the whole time. And now, here we are 6 or 8 weeks into the syndrome.
Dr. Malone?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Peter, you kindly did a shout out about famotidine. The trials that finally are about to launch has taken us a year and a half. And remember, this is the DOD pushing this to get them through the FDA. They've raised just amazing objections every step of the way. And they would give us letters. Peter, you'll appreciate this. We would get a letter with concerns in a clinical hold, and then we'd address all the concerns, and then they would take that in, and then they would give another letter with a whole different list of concerns. And that happened 4 times in a row. We had originally planned an arm that would include ivermectin together with famotidine and celecoxib, and we had data supporting that. And they wouldn't let us proceed unless we took the time to demonstrate in vitro the mechanism of action of ivermectin as an inhibitor of SARS-CoV-2 replication. So that was their prerequisite, is demonstration of MOA, mechanism of action, which has never been a predicate to prior clinical trials on a licensed drug. And, when I'd written the whole section on MOA for them, as Peter knows well, there's multiple mechanisms associated with ivermectin in this disease, but there it is.
You bring up the issue, Dr. Malone, you bring up the issue of kind of multi-action drugs. And I have a feeling, because there's so many drugs that are used to treat COVID-19, we're going to have a great interest in getting some dual or triple benefit of a drug. So with famotidine, it's not only, in theory and probably reality, reducing viral replication to some degree, but it's also an antihistamine, hydroxychloroquine, at least 3 mechanisms of action, ivermectin 3+ mechanisms of action. And, when I published 2 papers on treatment last year, there were some drugs I didn't include. And if I was to do another modification to the algorithm, I think famotidine would be in. I've been working with an Italian group, Dr. Fazio, on what's the best way to manage the constitutional symptoms. And we actually have data now supporting that non-steroidal superior to acetaminophen with Dr. Fazio, a nice analysis. And then other classes of drugs, I know the Frontline Critical Care Consortium and South American investigators are using anti-androgens short-term. And even the modest anti-androgen effect of spironolactone. There's another one, pralatumide, I believe. And I don't have any experience with that, but there's something interesting about SARS-CoV-2 the infection and the androgen receptor. And, we see that being leveraged in a treatment. And so that's something that would, I think, certainly be up in the realm of consideration. And then the other drug I didn't include, and now has had yet another positive trial, is fluvoxamine. Fluvoxamine, a trial that weighed in from Brazil. And it's interesting, fluvoxamine in my clinical practice is almost my go-to drug now for post-COVID, long COVID syndrome with neurologic abnormalities, almost by extension of the acute COVID-19 data. But now I believe we're up to 3 clinical trials, and this most recent one from Brazil, fairly convincing, and a more realistic effect size. So about a 30% reduction in hospitalization with fluvoxamine, a drug that's pretty easily prescribed, it's affordable. And so, I've had a good luck with that. But the point is, we have drugs to utilize in combination. Dr. Chetty additionally uses montelukast or Singulair, and I do that in my clinical practice based on his experience right now, particularly when there's a lot of rhinorrhea or nasal congestion. He also uses cyproheptadine. And so I think if we're not going to use ivermectin hydroxychloroquine in that top layer, that we end up building in a few more drugs. There's one other drug to consider, or 2 more drugs to consider. One is favipiravir or Avigan that the Japanese, Russia, and other used. And communicating with my colleagues there, they've been disappointed that that favipiravir just is slow to work. It's a single polymerase inhibitor. It doesn't appear to be too potent. And I know Canadian authorities were looking at it, but it probably won't play a major role. And then the other drug that I was the overall principal investigator on, I work with Operation Warp Speed on this in Bayer Pharmaceuticals, was rimatrabant. And rimatrabant is a combination of basically like an anti-inflammatory, but also it has anticoagulant properties. It's approved for allergic rhinitis in Japan. And we had a great proposal that would have moved forward. We couldn't get any light of day with the agencies on a drug trial.
Oh.
At least a year ago.
No, I think that when the book gets written, and by the way, Peter, I'm going to solicit directly on Tommy's show for the first time. Would you write a chapter in the book that I've been asked to write by Tony Lyons, who's the one publishing Bobby's book? So you don't have to answer right now, but the book is really all about a series of stories from people about what they've experienced, and your story is huge. You are the case study in harassment of physicians. I was going to say you commented about the polymerase inhibitors. So I also, the week before, we got a presentation from Merck on their polymerase inhibitor, and it was noted that the apparent efficacy, I should say, clinical trials, towards the end of that trial seemed to taper. And so one interpretation that was discussed at length within the committee, the active committee, and I think the Merck representative concurred to a significant extent, was that was consistent with less efficacy with Delta. And the working hypothesis was that the drug may be much less effective in viruses with large burst sizes. And of course, Omicron is the king of large burst size so far. So good to know. And clearly the polymerase inhibitors, no surprise to any virologist or anybody that's ever treated influenza, you've got to get it early. And that early means like in the first 2 to 3 days, if you want to really have an impact. Because as Richard Urso likes to say so often, and I'm sure you've heard him say it, with his metaphor of cars and car parts, the thing that gets you is the inflammatory phase. It's not the viral phase. When you're dealing with all the residual antigen and debris and junk coming from the virus that provokes this hyperinflammatory response, which is what kills you. And that the virus mostly, I think you would concur with Delta, that the chatter is that it's mostly cleared by day 5, and with the other variants that are a little slower growing by day 7, and then you get this second wave. I think that's another thing maybe you can comment on, because you practice, I don't. It is, I hear this story again and again. Recently heard it from one of my close colleagues who got sick with Delta, and he said, well, I took the drugs and I was feeling really good, so I stopped. And then the second wave hit him. And he really regretted having stopped his treatment.
Yeah, I want to comment on that. The large trial last year was a prospective cohort study by Mokhtari and colleagues from Iran, had 28,000 people. It was one of the largest studies, a treatment study. And they featured a 5-day course of hydroxychloroquine plus some supplements. And they only treated about 25% of adults. So they really were targeting high-risk seniors. And it did have an impact. I personally certainly have some anecdotes of getting burned on this, going short. And I'd say maybe, maybe a person around age 50 with, who was getting treatment and they clear rapidly, maybe a 5-day course, but someone my age, I think closer to 60 and above, I'd say a 10-day course. And for our seniors, people in senior facilities, et cetera, I have to tell you, I think 30 days. Now, it may not be 30 days on the antivirals, but I just had a patient today who's 76, and he went full 30 days on the anticoagulants. And I think that's very reasonable. The Japanese, I know by extension, they continue aspirin all the way out to 90 days because there are late strokes, there are late atherosclerotic events. And I think we can't be too cautious. In my practice, I did have a patient who earlier in the pandemic had COVID-19. He had multiple pulmonary emboli coming from his lower extremity venous system. And he had persistent emboli visible by imaging easily 9 to 12 months afterwards. And he kept coming in the office, when do I get to stop the blood thinners? I said, wow, I am so impressed. And so when Bruce Patterson presented the data about the persistence of the spike protein in the human body for a long duration after respiratory illness, it made sense that it probably does have a procoagulant effect in the human body.
Dr. Malone.
Well, and then we have the news that the CDC is now recommending against the J&J product. And I like to say, look, guys, I've been dealing with adenovirus vector technology literally my whole career, going back to those days in the late 80s at the Salk Institute, where the senior postdoc in the lab was the one that was developing the tech, then created the company Crucell, and sold that to J&J. So I've been tracking this pretty closely for a little while. And there are other licensed adenoviral vaccines, but there have never been licensed adenoviral vaccines with coagulopathy as a side effect. And this is one of those, it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck. It's probably a duck situation. What do we have in common? The virus causes microcoagulopathy unequivocally. The mRNA vaccines cause it. The adenovirus vaccines cause it. So those are different polynucleotides, different delivery systems. What do they all have in common? Spike.
I was going to say, Pfizer and the FDA coming out and saying that they recommend against the J&J because it might be dangerous is like, Vice President Dick Cheney, former CEO of Halliburton. It's like him coming out in 2003 and saying, hey, all these Iraq war contracts should be going to Halliburton, not Northrop Grumman. Those are greedy defense. It's like, hold on.
Or to take another example, Merck coming out against ivermectin was another similarly egregious one. I mean, I'm sorry I'm laughing. It's gallows humor because of the seriousness of what we're in, but they have no honor. I don't know what to say. They don't care.
On a certain level,
they have no shame.
I know it's insane. On a certain level, yeah, you're right. There is gallows humor where you just kind of have to laugh and you go, "What are we doing?" And it's now that I have you both. I mean, Dr. Malone, I believe I told you, after we did our first episode 495, I posted it and someone said, what does this guy know about the vaccines? And I said, well, he invented them. I said he invented them. And they said, well, Tommy, what do you know? I go, well, this is me interviewing him. This is the actual thing. And they said, well, what does he know about myocarditis? So a week later, I uploaded an episode with Dr. McCullough, and they said, what does he know about it? And I said, he's the most published cardiologist in world history. And then they said about both of you, they said, just because they're experts in this doesn't mean they understand it. And, it does kind of leaves you at gallows humor, where at a certain point you just go, I don't know. You're right. What do they know? But I know Dr. McCullough.
But
Yeah,
Tommy, let me
yes,
just
sir.
say for fact checking purposes, just to clarify, my field before really jumping into COVID is I studied the interface between heart and kidney disease. So I
Cardiorenal.
published, so I had some kind of dubious distinctions. One of the most published cardiologists in the nephrology literature.
Okay.
And to this day, I published one of the top 100 papers of all time in nephrology, but I was, obviously a cardiologist. I maintained my boards in both medicine and cardiology. So I studied that heart-kidney interaction, editor of the first textbook on the topic. But among cardiology, I give credit to William Roberts, who's at my institution. He has over 1,000 citations, and then Gene Braunwald at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Now, Braunwald is over 90, and Roberts is approaching 90. Braunwald's textbook of cardiology is the Bible of cardiology, and I've published a chapter in that textbook now. I'm going on my third decade. So I guess your listeners should have a sense that with Dr. Malone and myself, that we are, senior in our field. We've looked and examined and dealt with data our entire lives. Dr. Malone at this, very intensive basic and clinical translational perspective, and I'm much more from a clinical trial perspective and large population clinical strategy perspective. But America needs this expertise right now, Tommy. This idea that people are going to be discounted in favor of something else. They need this type of expertise. I readily admit, I didn't do an infectious disease fellowship, but I think going on 2 years now of dedicated study in this topic, I'm pretty far along in getting a handle on viral epidemiology and understanding more and more about vaccines. I honestly just accepted vaccines as advances in medicine and had no problem. I've taken all the vaccines on the schedule. My kids took all the vaccines on the schedule. In fact, I've been impressed with the pediatric literature about, in a sense, how vaccines have made a huge dent in pediatric infectious disease. We used to have pediatric wards in every hospital in the United States. They pretty much shut down progressively over time, and things basically consolidated to children's hospitals in the United States, and credit was given to vaccination of children that made a giant impact on pediatric and infectious disease. It's just that when this thing hit, in my view, this was all hands on deck. I think if more doctors like myself and Dr. Malone came out and we had careful exchanges of information as groups, we'd be farther off. What America's not seeing, what the world has not seen, is scientific interchange. And I think it's hurting us greatly.
Well, let me riff off of that, Tommy, just for a minute. Because Peter's really touching on some key nerves here. And by the way, I want to give a shout out. There, 2 of the 3 main organ systems that are damaged by SARS-CoV-2 are the heart and the kidneys. So if Peter was triple boarded in pulmonology, he would be a grand slam, but he's pretty close. What I wanted to mention was the disclosure of the email correspondence between Cliff Lane, Tony Fauci, and Francis Collins. And those who are, if you're not in, this is inside baseball. Cliff Lane for decades has been Tony's right-hand lieutenant, top lieutenant, particularly for anything clinical. They're the same age cohort. But in these emails, we've got Francis Collins chatting back and forth, sending smiley faces to the other 2, clearly stating the intention to damage the reputations and take out three of the most esteemed epidemiologists in the world, and asserting that they're not qualified. They're from very small, unknown institutions. As I recall, it was Oxford, Harvard, and Stanford. So I know those aren't as good as Baylor, but still not bad. But according to Francis Collins, who made his big career advance, by the way, was running a sequencing lab and being the first to sequence the cystic fibrosis transmembrane regulatory protein, and then playing a role in duking it out with Craig Venter over who gets credit for the Human Genome Project. But that's Francis Collins' claim to fame. Epidemiologist, he is not. Public health official, he is not. Vaccinologist, he is not. Immunologist, he is not. But that doesn't stop him from having an opinion that top full professor epidemiologists from Oxford, Harvard, and Stanford are not qualified to opine on, if your listeners aren't aware, the topic was that the Great Barrington Declaration was recommending against lockdowns. Okay? And you've got on videotape now, interview by Brett Baier, Fox News, Francis Collins, flat out admitting that he was doing his best to destroy this and their reputations, totally gaslighting them as not qualified, as fringe epidemiologists, and asserting that if they hadn't done lockdowns, millions and millions and millions of more lives would have been lost, I think is a direct quote. And the problem with that is the data, because there are multiple studies out that show that lockdowns actually kill more people than they save. And there's another obscure publication that just came out with a summary of those in the lay press called the Wall Street Journal that published today on that point. So you got Francis Collins saying it's okay for me and Tony and Cliff to conspire to destroy the Great Barrington Declaration and force the press to diss these three guys, claiming they're not qualified, and doing everything they can to shut down legitimate scientific dialogue. And this, by the way, is the repeated claim that is well documented in the book on Tony Fauci by RFK. So, anybody that was skeptical, as if RFK's book isn't adequately, it's hard to read, it's so heavily footnoted. Yet here we have another example, and Francis Collins is unabashed. He is full-throated, all in. It's okay to shut down scientific discourse and do their best to damage the reputation of esteemed full professors, because he thought it was the right thing to do, and it was his opinion. And Tony and Cliff's, neither of which have the qualifications that Peter has as an epidemiologist, right? That is what we've been living with. I'm sorry for that rant.
No,
but I'm really not sorry.
No, don't be. Your rants are always beautiful, and I know, Dr. Malone, I know you got to run in 10 minutes, so we'll try to cram in as much as we can. Dr. McCullough, what you were saying about these experts, but that really is, and not to toot my own horn, I wanted to talk about like space travel back in the early 200s of my episode. So I had on Rob Manning, the chief of NASA JPL, and I wanted to talk about going to other planets. And I remember kind of along the same line, maybe I shouldn't be mad at these Facebook commenters. They kind of pushed me to go farther, but they said like, that's just sending robots to Mars. Like, that's not real human space travel. So 5 episodes later, I got Charlie Duke, the 10th man to walk on the moon, and actually asked him what it was like to walk on the effing moon. But see, it doesn't matter if I'm talking. It doesn't matter if Stu Peters or Joe Rogan or Alex Jones. People want to hear, because, right, they can do these very quick and easy character assassinations. Oh, RFK, are you a doctor? Oh, Aaron Rodgers, where'd you get your epidemiology degree at? So what you have to do is you do have to bring on the big guns, and you both are incredibly humble, but, you guys do have to go on these shows. I mean, Dr. McCullough just going on Rogan, Dr. Malone, you keep coming back to my little podcast, but you guys are doing what needs to be done. We, Dr. Malone and I talked to Dr. Aditi Bhargava 2 weeks ago from UCSF, and she's going out and she's saying that, she's talking while holding an academic position. You guys are doing what needs to be done. And, with medicine, it does never stop. You finish medical school, you finish residency, you finish your fellowship, you finish all of your, all of your work. And then you have to still keep going back to these conferences. And I think what we're seeing right now is it truly doesn't stop. Now you guys are in your fifth, sixth decade of schooling, but now you're learning about, that upper level class, how to fight against some global conspiracy to shut down alternative medication and, save 85% of the people that are being infected. And they're moving the goalposts with, define Dr. McCullough, as you just said, about, always been pro-vaccine. So I got a booster, but I got a tetanus booster just about 2 months ago. Like, I've always been for it, but they're now moving the goalposts, right? And it makes me think of when they changed the definition of vaccination. Well, what does that really matter? Well, to everyone listening, I would like to remind you that it has been 79 years this month since the United States has gone to war. 79 years since we have officially gone to war. You may be wondering, what about Korea? What about Vietnam? What about Grenada? What about Iraq? What about Iraq again? What about Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Oman? No, technically, we have not gone to war since December 1942. That's the importance of changing legal definitions of things, is because I would say we have been at war for a long time. But I know I'm ranting now. Dr. McCullough, thoughts on everything?
Tommy, I just wanted to say, I wanted America to understand that, American medicine and medicine worldwide is a collaboration. In my field in cardiology, we have a tradition. It's called Bethesda conferences. These were open meetings, NIH, industry, academic doctors in practice, and we would basically apply our collective scholarship to try to come up with, either new understanding of a disease, or maybe a new approach for unanswered questions for a research agenda, maybe even a request for applications through the NIH. This is really the bedrock of what we do. In many, I trained at UT Southwestern in medicine, in medical school, and then University of Washington in Seattle. It's not uncommon to have citywide meetings, citywide pulmonary meetings, or citywide. I remember back in the day, meetings about tuberculosis management, actually with Seattle with our infectious disease group. We have had none of that with COVID-19. There aren't any citywide meetings. There's no collaboration, no Bethesda conferences. We're not seeing that at all. And we're accessible. Dr. Malone and myself and many others, we're going into cities, giving academic presentations. I gave an academic presentation recently in Chattanooga, and we had a program. It was well attended for doctors and healthcare professionals going into science, then one for lay persons, the second one. But one of the individuals in the crowd came up to me afterwards, a very reasonable lady, and she said, "Dr. McCullough, I have a very good doctor here in Chattanooga." And I told him, "You're coming to town," and invited him to maybe go attend that. That we don't have outside experts coming in and giving presentations on COVID-19. And this doctor was very upset with that suggestion. And then he actually took the effort later on to write this lady and her husband a letter discharging them from his clinic, asking them never to return again. I mean, if you look at the effort that it took that doctor and the vitriol to do that, I mean, it's unprecedented.
Dr. Malone?
Actually, that was what I was in Nashville, as you know, last Saturday, and I had multiple stories shared with me of retaliation against docs that were administering early treatments. There is a culture there that's a little bit wicked. But I want to really applaud Peter for his commitment to education, his ongoing commitment, despite all the outrageous slings and arrows that are tossed at him. And I'm going to give another breaking here on Tommy's show. Peter, are you interested in going to Hawaii at the end of January? For
I'd love to,
teaching CME.
I'm just so booked up right now. There's not a single hour or day there. So, but we have a lot of things going on going to be taking place through the months of January and February. And, at this point in time, the evolution of the knowledge, the burgeoning number of treatments that we have, the positive outcomes. I tell you, I just came from a major medical center in Dallas. We are not overrun with COVID. Believe me, the city has COVID well under control. The word is out. Patients are seeking early treatment. I think there's much more scholarship and analysis on vaccine safety and efficacy. You mentioned the announcement on Johnson and Johnson. I have seen in my clinical practice with Johnson, I had a Johnson and Johnson patient today who was hospitalized a week or two as a military officer with probably a mild case of myocarditis or mild pericarditis. Is mild, and there's nothing on his exam or review that was worrisome at all. And obviously there's a spectrum, but I've had two women that have both developed spontaneous deep venous thrombosis of the arm,
Wow.
the same arm that received the injection. One
It's lateral. Wow.
Yeah, one occurred after Johnson and Johnson at about, I think about a month to 6 weeks. And then the other one, a patient who I know well, I took care of her for 10 years. So I know her very, very well. She presented with one at 6 months. She also had, the predisposing factor to the one at 6 months is she had what's called thoracic outlet obstruction syndrome, and did ultimately, as part of the treatment for the thrombus, because we had to give emergency thrombolytics, is actually ultimately do a vascular surgery. But the point I'm making is with Johnson and Johnson, the advantage was it was a one injection program, but then, the news came out that in fact it was going to be 2 injections. AstraZeneca, the analog outside the United States, was always 2 injections. And now that if the FDA has narrowed the field to Pfizer and Moderna, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Dr. Malone.
Well, I can to that end, Peter, I can tell you that that there's, I think, half a dozen that are WHO authorized, and I'm seeing encouraging data with the whole inactivated virus vaccines. I think that the absence, and then my buddy Nick Petrovsky, who I hope to do a podcast with soon, maybe we should do this with Tommy, from Australia, has got his vaccine now allowed in Australia. Finally, he had to pay a bunch of money, and he would very much like it to bring him to the United States. That's another subunit inactivated or a subunit expressed antigen for traditional vaccine. I think that the FDA, well, they have done us disservice, kind of soup to nuts on this, as far as I'm concerned. But there are alternatives that are looking encouraging, and Omicron may turn out to be our friend. I'm sure there'll be people with disease in your hospital, Peter, but it's certainly looking much less lethal and able to displace Delta. So there it is. I did want to mention, Tommy, that I put out this video from Puerto Rico a week ago, in which I strongly caution that parents think twice before administering vaccine to their children. And I mentioned that the vaccines are associated with damage to brain, heart, coagulopathy, reproductive and immunologic consequences. And this has generated a firestorm. The thing has gone viral. I've been attacked officially by the governments of Spain, Italy, and Israel. And the saying, the flak is worse when you're over the target, bombs away. And so the Israeli Ministry of Health on Saturday launched a Facebook campaign against Malone, not Dr. Malone, who is absolutely not the original inventor and has no legitimacy at all, and has been debunked for the likes of Reuters and Atlantic Monthly. And here's the silver lining you were talking about. And no, it's not the shark bit off my leg. Good thing I have two. Supporters came out in droves on the Israeli Ministry of Health website and just lambasted the Ministry of Health for what they had said about me. And then there was an article in the alternative press in Israel that's gotten huge traction that also attack them. And then, but here's the little dark side on that. So I was doing a podcast today with Israel for 2 hours, and during that there was a Ministry of Health statement that issued. So this is truly live, breaking news. They're acknowledging that even with 3 to 4 jabs, it's not protecting, and that the Israeli people had to get ready for a wave. But here's the thing, and I confirmed this with the person that I was interviewing with, that is the conundrum. State of Israel, the population is highly, highly vaccinated. They're now on 4, all with Pfizer, of course. But there's natural controls in the surrounding countries, including the Palestinian Authority, that are way, way under vaccinated compared to Israel. And their mortality rates are in the cellar compared to the mortality rate in Israel. The dark side of what we're looking at right now, the data is coming in again and again and again. And I think we have to be cautious, and I'm sure Peter will concur. The confounding variables are enormous, but the data are sure coming in strong that it's the vaccinated that are getting infected. And that is worrisome.
So Tommy, we're gonna have to leave it there. I'm gonna have to join another meeting, but thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I'll wrap it up, and as I will volunteer for Dr. McCullough to go to Hawaii with Dr. Malone. And but we will wrap this up. What I do want to tell everyone is 75 years ago today, A Wonderful Life came out. There are 2 Christmases you can celebrate: the White House secretary release, or A Beautiful Life, or A Wonderful Life. So choose your reality.
Tommy. Tommy, there's one other thing.
Dr. McCullough, you can leave if you need to go. It's fine.
But I think, Peter, are you going to be at the DC rally?
Yeah, I'll be arriving later in the day that day. I've got an obligation in Minnesota, but I have some duties the next day. So yeah, I'll be in those circles. So.
And I think this is January 24 or 23.
I believe that the Sunday is the 23. That's the rally. That's what I mentioned on the Joe Rogan show, and should be a great, actually a great group of scientists and other freedom leaders in town, and I think it'll be a great time for America. I mean, what's America always unified Americans is freedom. And so I think we're seeing that right now, and it's galvanized around medical freedom, which has its linkage to social and then economic freedoms. But I'm going to have to go. See you guys.
Bye-bye. So save the date.
Take care.
January 23. Peter and Bobby Kennedy and myself and many others are going to talk.
Hell yeah.
DC.
Dr. McCullough, I'll let you run. Dr. Malone, I will absolutely volunteer to go to Hawaii. I just want to put that out there. I will absolutely do that. Hold on. I'll stop recording. 1, 3. Let me stop.